In this video, we're going to throw $650 of fluid and filters at this Kubota MX5200 HST. We're going to change the hydraulic and transmission fluid and filters. We're going to change the engine oil and filter. We're going to change the front axle fluid. We're going to change the fuel filter. We'll change the fuel separator element, put a new O-ring on that, clean the sediment bowl up. We're going to change the air filters, and then we're going to go around it. We're going to hit all the grease fittings, and we're going to make sure that all the fittings take grease. Anything that looks like it needs lubricated, like back on the 3-point, a lot of that stuff is metal on metal, but it doesn't have grease fittings. We're going to go ahead and lubricate all that stuff. Stick around, guys. I'll show you what it takes to do all that. First thing we're going to do is change the air filters. So pull that out two-handed. Pull that pin out, slide the brush guard forward, pull the hood release, hood comes right up. The air filters, there are two of them, they live in here. This little doodad down here, you're supposed to squeeze that, and any large particles, piece of rock, or if you got critters, you know, corn, little stuff like that could fall out. So you're supposed to do that periodically to clear that housing out of big stuff. We got these clasps here. There's two that you can see. There's one that you kind of got to reach around and just feel for it. Then this comes off, and you can see it's kind of dirty in there. I'm going to go blow this out with the air compressor. We're going to pull these elements out, and you can see I wrote the date on them last time they were changed. So this outer one should be pretty dirty, but the inner one shouldn't be too bad. This is called your primary. The big one on the outside is a primary. That one's pretty dirty. We're going to throw that away. This is the secondary. I think this is the secondary if I'm remembering right. And that one is really, really clean. So I'm going to go ahead and write the date on the new ones, and we'll get them installed in here. So you can see I wrote the new dates on here. Now I did not blow out that, I didn't blow out this canister just because I don't want to blow any dirt into the thing accidentally. Just spinning that around. So my date is up. You really got to push that in. It's a snug fit, but you want that. And then this one will kind of finagle around to get it in there. It's just a tight squeeze with this loader arm here. And I'm going to spin that so that the date is up. And this one is a snug fit too. Wiggle it around. There we go. Really want to push that back in there to make sure your cap goes on without having to force it. Okay, so those are on there. I blew the dust out of the cap. We're going to put that back on. I don't know if I'll be able to do this with one hand or not. I might have to put you guys down. All right, just needed two hands, but I was able to get that cap on. I got all three clasps on there. I can reach around behind, make sure nothing feels out of whack. It's on there straight. So there is a order to why I'm doing the things that I'm doing. Like I say, I've got a bunch of stuff to do, but I want to do sort of the easiest things first and things that I can stay clean doing. So like I'm going to do that first. Then I'm going to go down and do the engine oil because that's going to make a little bit of a mess. Then I'm going to do the hydraulic system because that's going to make a little more of a mess. Then the last sort of fluid thing that I'm going to do is this front axle because that's going to make the most mess. So I'm trying to do them in order of, you know, I don't want to do the front axle, make a big nasty mess down here and then have to crawl through it to do all the other things that I could have done without being so messy. So the next thing we're going to do is the engine oil, and to do that we're going to take off This fairing right here, this little side cover, which is, I think it's kind of half off right now already. So I'm going to take that off to get to that filter. And I probably wouldn't have to do it to get to the filter for this project, but because I'm going to do the fuel filter, I will need to. So I'm just going to take that fairing off. Then I'm going to come around here and show you. So there's the filter on that side. Then the oil drain it's pretty easy to see down here. The oil drain, the pan is split, so it's got a drain plug on this side and a drain plug on this side, and it's split to allow that front drive shaft to go through. So first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to get my oil bucket down here. I'm going to pop both those drain plugs, drain it out. Okay, so I got that little fairing off the side of the engine. That's just held on by one wing bolt. Then we're going to come over here, and it's going to make a little bit of a mess when I unscrew this. This is just a screw off cartridge filter. Not a cartridge filter, it's a screw off filter. There's a line under it that you really can't get out of the way. So there's some sort of a, I don't know, it's got a piece of loom around it. It's going to get a little bit oily, but I'm just going to take my wrench, unscrew that. I've got my catch pan under there. I've already drained the oil pan. It quit dripping, so I put both plugs back in it. We'll get this drained. We'll get the new one screwed on there. Okay, so got the filter changed. That really didn't make much mess at all. Actually, it didn't drip on that loom as bad as I thought it would. Just a little bit on the axle, but not really much of a mess at all. The oil fill, this camera does such a crappy job. It is really not that dark in here. The oil fill is right here. It's a little plastic cap about 1 inch in diameter. It says oil right on it, but it's kind of hiding behind a couple of lines here. So I'm going to pop that off, stick a funnel down through there. The oil that we're going back with is Kubota 15W40. Just quickly, I'll touch on the oil and filters and stuff. I'm going with Kubota on everything. When I use my tractor, I use it. So I don't want to take any chances on any inferior filters or oils or anything like that. I know a lot of guys are going to say, you know, one's just as good as the other, or a certain brand is this or that, whatever. I run Kubota in this thing. The last guy ran Kubota stuff on this one, so I bought this tractor used. I've had 0 issues out of it, and I want to continue that as much as I can. Okay, so I popped my cap off, stuck my funnel in there, and it's not too bad to get to when you reach around the top of the loader arm here. Stuck my funnel in there. I put 7 quarts in it. It was reading full, so then I ran the tractor for a few minutes, let the oil and everything circulate. Shut the tractor off, let it settle for a minute or two, well, a few minutes, and then check it again and needed a quart. So right here's your dipstick. I'm on the left-hand side of the tractor now. 8 quarts, topped it right up. So the next thing I'm going to move on to now is the transmission service, and I've got my bucket down here already. There are 4 drains for this system. I'm going to show you all 4 of them. You don't need to use one of them though. So the first one, the primary one, is, I'll get out of the way. That's the primary one right there. That big honking plug sticks down. It's really noticeable when you're under here. I'm not sure what size it is. I ain't put a wrench on it yet. That's going to be the primary drain. There's another drain under here. Takes an Allen head. In the book, it's going to tell you that that's a drain. That, you know, there's another drain for the same, it ends up being on the same case. And from doing this service before, I know that when you drain that big one, drain it all the way out till it quits dripping, there is no fluid in that one. There is not some sort of divider in here. There's not some sort of belly or something where fluid easily flows from this cavity all the way back, so you do not need to pull out this Allen head drain. When I first did this service, I drained everything back here on the big plug. It was basically quit dripping. Then I climbed under here with an Allen wrench, which was a pain in the butt to find one that big. And when I popped that out, I didn't get a drop of fluid out of it. So it is not, you don't need to pull that plug. So This system holds 10 gallons of fluid or thereabouts. Actually, it holds like almost 12 with a loader and everything. It's going to take about 9 gallons to refill the system though. You know, you never get it all out. So we're going to end up getting about 9 gallons out of that plug there. So you're going to need a pretty good sized drain pan. It's going to take, I'm going to use a 5-gallon bucket here if I can get it to fit easily in and out. But I'm going to have to, you know, I'm only going to be able to fill it up 5 gallons. I'm going to have to reach up under here and put that plug back in. And then, so it's going to kind of be a little bit messy. So there's the primary drain that you need to concern yourself with. There are also 2 other drains back here that we'll get to these. Let's see. There's a big bull gear. See that big gear case makes, you know, big circular looking gear case there. The big bull gear on each side of this. And there's a drain right here and another one identical on the other side. So we're going to drain the big one up front. It's going to get the biggest part of the fluid out. Then after that's done dripping, I'll come back here and crack these, and you'll get enough out of here where it's worth pulling those out. I mean, I don't know how much is back there. I'll pay attention this time, but I do remember last time I did this service, there's enough fluid back here that you definitely do need to drain these 2 little ones in the back. I ended up using just my regular oil pan. I don't know how much it holds, a couple, 3 gallons. I ended up dumping that 3 times, I think, or filling it up 3 times. So I just laid under there till it'd fill up, and then I'd stick the plug in. So it makes a little bit of a mess, but I couldn't figure out how I was going to get a bucket in and out of there and get my arm up through there and put the plug back in when the bucket was full. So anyhow, that worked out pretty good using that. Then I came back here with my little pan and drained that side first, and then it's still dripping, so I just put that small container under it. But you can see how much fluid I've got out of that. I mean, there's probably not quite a gallon out of this side. This side here, when I did it, I got a little more out of it. So I don't know if, you know, the 2 cases being connected up here and the first drain to go just allowed more fluid through. So, all right, well, as you can see, I've got the filter off on this side. Got it dribbling in the bucket there. Again, I don't remember if this is, the book calls this the suction filter, or excuse me, if they call it the trans filter or the hydraulic filter, but again, it's on the same system, and actually even on the filter itself, it calls it the suction filter. I do remember that I caught way more particles, like there's a sliver. There was way more junk on this filter last time I changed it, and that makes me think that that must have been the first time that filter had been changed. Because there was, I don't know, this is really the only sliver on here. There's some little gritty stuff, you know, there is material that this magnet has caught, but there was probably, I'm going to guess 5 or 10 times more on it when I changed it 2 years ago. So yeah, I wasn't scared of it then, and what I'm seeing here, I'm actually very happy with what I see here. So, you know, this is not a scary amount of stuff. So if you're changing your filter out and you get a little bit of junk on it, don't be scared of that one little sliver and some little chunks. Your filter's doing its job. If it didn't generate any junk, they wouldn't put a filter on it. So there's 2 filters in this system. So just keep that in mind. This is not a scary amount of metal. Well, you can see we got the filter off this side, and this is definitely the high pressure side. So the other one was the suction filter. This is the high pressure filter, and you can tell when you got this thing in your hand, it's much heavier. You can't, I mean, most filters, you give them a little squeeze, you can feel the sidewall flex. You cannot flex this. This is a heavy built filter. So the new one looks identical, same part number. I'm going to go ahead and put a little clean hydraulic fluid on that O-ring and get that one installed. Okay, so we got all our plugs back in. We've changed our filters. We're ready to fill the system back up. And the fill is back here at the back of the tractor. It's a red plug. I've got it taken out there. It's right there between the lift arms of the 3-point. You can see I've got my funnel kind of bungee corded on there. Because this stuff comes in 5-gallon buckets, it's kind of awkward to handle it. So I'm gonna climb up here with a bucket in my hand, the bungee cord hopefully will hold the funnel in place. And I wanna fill it up until I see fluid in the sight glass there. Can you see that, that round white dot there? That white is a background inside the sight glass. Now, if you got a helper or something out here, right now would be the time to use them. They could hold that funnel for you so you don't make a mess, and more importantly, they can keep an eye on that sight window, because this fluid is so clean that if you don't put a dye in it or something, which I don't, it's hard to tell if your sight glass is empty or if it's full and it's full of clean fluid. So I'm gonna put about, this thing should hold total about 9 gallons is probably what I'm gonna end up changing. Again, the whole system holds much more, but you can never get it all out of, you know, all the, hell, the remote lines are holding a little bit. You got a little bit in the cylinders in the front. Depending on what the position of the lift arms is, I'm sure that makes a difference. So the whole system itself is supposed to hold like, I don't know, something like 11.5 gallons or whatever, but we're probably only gonna end up changing about 9 gallons. So I'm gonna put the first bucket in, just come back here and make sure that, you know, that it's not on the window. It shouldn't be by then. Then I'm gonna dump a little bit of the second bucket in. I'm gonna probably get about 6 or 7 gallons in it, and then I'm gonna start keeping a real close eye on that sight window. And once I get fluid in the sight window, then I'm gonna start the tractor up. I'm gonna cycle the hydraulics, move the tractor back and forth, you know, through the hydrostat and everything, kind of circulate everything through here, try to work out any air that's in the system. Then we'll check it again, and I would expect it to take probably another gallon. Sight glass is about 3/4 full. So it took me, I don't know, it took me a bit more than I thought it would. There's I would say about a gallon left in that jug. So it took me a full jug plus almost another full jug. There's about a gallon in there. So I probably have put in about 9 gallons right now. 8 to 9 gallons, something like that. I'm gonna go ahead and start the tractor up, let it warm up a minute, kind of cycle everything, raise the loader up and down, roll the bucket in and out. I'll probably hit my 3-point or my third function a few times just to see if that'll cycle anything. I will roll the tractor forward and backward a few times, just try to work out any bubbles that might be in the system. Then we'll let it set for a few minutes, and we'll see what that sight glass looks like then. Okay, so hopefully you can see there that we're about maybe 1/4 of the way up the sight glass after me, you know, cycling everything. So we got some air worked out of the system, so that's a good thing. I'm gonna go ahead and top that off. Okay, so hopefully you can see that we are, well, about 3/4 of the way up that sight window. That might be completely full and just capturing a little air bubble there. But it took a little more fluid than I guess I was expecting. There's not quite a gallon left in there. So a little over 9 gallons probably. There's a pretty good splash in the bottom of that bucket. So now the next thing we're gonna do is, I think we're gonna go ahead and do the fuel filter next. This is just a spin-off fuel filter, real simple. So I'm going to spin the old one off, you know, lubricate the new one with a little diesel fuel on top of the O-ring and spin the new one on. Then since I've got the system open, I'm going to go ahead and come down here. This is the sort of sediment bowl and water separator. See that white line? This white line right here is the safe line for your red float ring. So my float ring, you can see that little bit of a red down there at the bottom, that's a little plastic ring. It floats on water. So when that little red ring starts floating up and it gets to that white line, that's the maximum amount of water that you want to allow in this sediment bowl. Because mine's sitting on the bottom, that means I don't have any water in my system here. So that's a really good thing. You really want to see that ring always sitting on the bottom. So anyhow, there is also a screen in there. It's a brass screen. So we're gonna turn this fuel cock. Let's see which way does it go. It goes one way or another. There we go. We're going to turn that to the off position. So horizontal is the off position. I'm going to unscrew this nut. Should just be by hand. Might take a channel locks or whatever, but should be able to get that off by hand. And then this is full of fuel, so it's going to make a little bit of a mess. But we'll get that off. We'll clean any dirt that might be in there out of the bottom of it. I'll show you that little ring and that screen that's in there. Okay, so here we are over at the bench. This is that sediment bowl I was talking about. And this is that brass screen that it's sort of a friction fit on that O-ring. So this just pushes up inside there. So you just, you know, after you unscrew that big nut, and I had to use channel locks on it, it got a little tight. I guess probably some dirt in the threads and stuff. But that really only should be hand tight. After you take that nut loose, this whole assembly then slides right off, and you'll see this brass screen. You'll see about half of it sticking out. Half of it's kind of tucked up in the tractor. You just grab that and wiggle it around and pop it out. Again, it's kind of messy, but you can see, well, hopefully you can see, you know, the amount of dirt that caught. You know, that's dirt that was coming from the fuel tank, and then it runs through that screen before it gets, you know, up to the filter. So this acts just like a sediment bowl on the old tractors. You used to have a glass bowl, and now you can see, well, sorry, working with one hand here. You can see how much dirt's in there. I'll dump out that little ring. So that spring holds the screen up in there in place, and then this ring is just some kind of plastic. It floats on water, but it doesn't float on the diesel fuel. So that just sits in there, and anyhow, that's how all that works. Look at all that dirt. So I'm gonna go ahead and get all this cleaned out real good. I'm just gonna use some clean diesel fuel to clean that all up, and this O-ring I'm gonna go ahead and replace. I made sure I bought a new one. There's the part number if you're looking for it. So I'm going to go ahead and get this cleaned up. I'll get it put back in there. I nearly forgot to mention I did pick up a new separator screen. Last time I did this job, I cleaned that one and reused it. But this time I went ahead and just bought a new one. You could probably reuse it if you wanted to, but you know, that O-ring is going to wear out over time. And there is stuff, little particles are kind of embedded in that screen. So I'm just going to go ahead and replace it this time around. Alright, so we got our assembly all put back together up in there. You can see again that the red ring is on the bottom. I guess that you can maybe see that element now. I guess that brass element is stuck halfway up in there, but just the top of it's stuck up in there. So I wiped off the threads and everything, and I just put that back on hand tight. We are now going to go through a series of steps that is very important. Anytime you open up the fuel system, you need to get the air back out of the system, or you're going to have a lot of trouble starting your tractor. Sometimes you get lucky, but most times you're not going to get lucky. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to turn that valve back open. That allows fuel from the tank back into the bowl. And I don't know, you may have seen it, you may have not. There's a little bit of a dribble coming. You're not going to see much fuel yet. The very next step, this is critical, we're going to go over here to the top of the housing. Let me get a light. This camera just does a terrible job of picking up light. So here again is our screw-on filter. At the top of that housing is a 10 millimeter head. That's a bleeder. The book says to open this up something like 2 turns, I think. That's about 2 turns. So then we're going to come over here. We're not going to turn the tractor on. Don't turn it to the crank position. Only turn it on where the fuel pump will run. So now we should see. So that filled right up. I can see some bubbles in fact. So I'm looking for drips, make sure we don't have a bad seal there. Everything looks copacetic there. Now we're gonna come over here, and I'm listening for fuel to return back to the tank. Okay, that sounds pretty good. Sounded pretty well normal. So now we're gonna turn that bleeder back in. And you don't want to kill this thing. You just want it snug. That's plenty good and tight. Okay, so now, because my glow plugs would have cooled down again, I'm going to shut it all back down. Fuel pump should shut off here in a second. Okay, now I'm going to watch for my plugs. There we go. That took a lot longer than it normally does. But if we wouldn't have bled that out, it would not have started right there. So I'm going to let this run just for a few minutes and make sure I got all my air bubbles worked out. Open that door up. The exhaust on these tractors blows out toward the front, in case you guys didn't know that. There's the exhaust pipe right there. It blows to the front. Right there I can feel that blowing on my hand. So if you need to ventilate, you know, pull the tractor up to the door and let it blow out. Okay, so moving on to the front axle. Again, this is, I don't know if I mentioned it before, but this is a four-wheel drive unit. So to change the fluid in the front axle, just quickly to go over the components. This big plug on top, that's the fill hole. This little bolt is actually a plug. That's the level hole. That's the amount, you know, that you fill it up to that. So then to drain it, there are two drains, one on each sort of wheel. Here's the drain over here, and then there's one sort of identical over there. So I'm going to drain the thing one side at a time. I'll show you the setup I've got. This is the engineers at Kubota really didn't help you out on this one. So you can see I got a piece of angle iron laid in there. It runs down to my drain pan. This just makes a damn mess. So I guess if a guy wanted to, I thought about it. About taking this wheel off, jacking one side up, take the wheel off, drain that side. I don't want to go through all the trouble of taking a wheel off just to do this. So I kind of expect that this is going to make a giant mess. That's why we did the engine oil and the transmission and the fuel, all that stuff that we're working on the ground. That's why we did all that before, in case we do make a giant sloppy mess down here with this project. So I'm going to go ahead and crack that. This again right here is that's the plug for this side. So I'm going to crack that and we'll see how it goes. Okay, it's working okay. You can see I made a little bit of a mess here. When I took that plug out, it was barely anything, just little bits of glug, glug, glug. So I went over on the other side and I cracked the fill plug to let air in the system, and when I did, that's when it overflowed my angle iron. So I've just got that plug kind of sitting in. I'll show you what I mean. I've just got the plug on top here. I've just got it sitting in by a couple of threads just to sort of limit the amount of air that I'm allowing in there. And I'm making a mess, but it's for the most part it's working okay. All right, well, this one made a bigger mess than the other side did. You can see the kitty litter down there trying to absorb, I don't know how much I spilled, probably almost as much as went in the bucket. And on that note, the amount of fluid that's in here, I think this system holds like about 2 gallons, something like that. So you can see I have pulled out the check hole plug. I just went ahead and pulled that out. That's it sitting up here. I'm going to go ahead and grab my funnel, stick it in the hole there, and the fluid that we're going to use is the same fluid, the Super UDT2. That's the same stuff that goes in the hydraulics and transmissions. Now, when I bought fluid the other day, when I bought all my filters and stuff, I bought 2 buckets knowing that there'd be a little bit left over in that one, plus I had some left over from the last time I did this service. So if you're going to do all these things that I'm doing today, you're going to need to buy 2 buckets plus like another gallon or 2. Or just go ahead and buy 3 buckets and you'll have a little left over if you need it for later. Well, I got the front axle fluid changed, got it all closed back up, and I would rather change that transmission fluid 10 times as to have to do that one time. That's a pain in the butt. It just makes a mess. If you got a spot out in your gravel that you don't mind killing a few weeds, this would be a good spot to do it. So anyhow, just to recap, you know, we drained it using both the plugs down there. Then when I filled it, I had that fill hole. I had the plug out of the fill hole, and I had a funnel in the fill. I went ahead and raised up the loader just to give me access to pour, you know, in there. Just be careful when you're doing that. You should never work under a loader. Support it, put something in the frame here, a piece of angle iron or something for safety's sake, or just be careful if you're working under the loader. So anyhow, that's how I filled it. And then when it ran out the hole, or ran out that check hole there, I put the plug back in, put both plugs in. I went ahead and pulled forward and backward a few times just to try to work any air out of the system. Then I opened everything back up, and in fact I did then put probably another, I don't know, 3/4 of a gallon, something like that, in it. So altogether, I'm gonna guess it probably did hold about 2 gallons or so. To drain the cooling system, the plug is located here at the bottom of the radiator. It's that Phillips head looking plug. Unfortunately, it's located directly above that guard, so it's going to want to drain down, splash on that guard. I'm going to go ahead and I'll put a bucket down, put a funnel down to try to capture it, but I know it's going to splash around and make a mess, so I'm going to do this outside so I'm not making a giant mess here in the shop. Once I drain it, I'll put the plug back in, and then I'm going to fill the system back up with distilled water, just distilled water, and I'm going to run the tractor for about 10 minutes, just enough to get it up to temperature where I know the thermostat's going to open up and let that distilled water kind of cycle through and sort of flush any of the junk that might be sitting in it. I'll then drain the distilled water, you know, doing the same method, and then we'll fill it back up with, brand new coolant mix, concentrate mix 50/50 with distilled water. Only use distilled water in your cooling system though. If you're using tap water or well water, you're putting minerals into that system that are gonna kind of build up and clog up the system. So only use distilled water for this stuff, guys. So you can see what I meant about it leaking all over that front end, so, you know, it's gonna make a mess. So I got the plug back in. I filled up the radiator all the way with distilled water, and it took that whole gallon and about half, a little more than half, to fill that back up with distilled water. Just barely a dribble coming out. I'm getting tired of waiting on it. Now this thing, you don't want to bear down on it. It's just a plastic plug. It's got that big thick rubber washer on it. So I filled it back up with fresh new coolant, and last time I did this project, the dealership sent me home with Kubota brand, and this time they sent me home with a Starfire. So I had some, I don't know, generic mixed up already. I always keep a couple of gallons laying around, so I just went ahead and put whatever I had mixed up. It's just some generic green. Could have been this Providence or could have been Prestone, I don't know. But that's what I filled it back up with, and I took a took a jug of water after I was all done. I filled it up, left the cap off, started it back up, let it run for a few minutes, let it kind of cycle around, make sure I didn't have any air bubbles in the system, and then shut the tractor off, and the level came right back up to the top. So put my cap back on, took a jug of water and just splashed around to try to, wash off any of that antifreeze. Splashed it all around here, just kind of wash off any antifreeze, because that stuff's all sticky and nasty, and you don't want it laying around in corners that attracts dust and dirt so bad. So I'm going to get this thing pulled back into the barn here. And one thing that I forgot to do before, when I clean the air filters, I forgot to clean this that screen. So I need to pull that screen out. I want to get it back in the barn, get the heat turned on. We'll pull that screen out, take it over to the air compressor, clean it off, and then we're going to go around here with a grease gun and grease everything up. So this screen should just pull right out. You got to kind of flip up this little retainer spring thing. Just kind of pull that up, and this screen slides right out. You can see all the crap on there. I'm way overdue for cleaning that off. This should be done pretty regularly, and as you can see, I don't do it regularly. Well, the wire brush ended up being the right tool for that job. I did drag the air hose over here though, and I blew as much as I could from behind, blow the dirt through the radiator, and went ahead and blew these other two coolers off. They were pretty caked up with crap. If it wasn't 20 degrees out, I'd probably take it outside and wash this off real good. I'll do that in the next few days. It's supposed to warm up, so I'll give this thing a bath. Okay, so I got my screen slid back in there. Just kind of pull that little wire tab out of the way, that little spring-loaded deal. Slides back in there. I forgot to mention I also did fill up my bottle. I dumped that out, cleaned it out, and then refilled it with fresh new coolant as well. So the next thing is going to be to take the grease gun around here and hit every grease fitting, grease zerk, whatever you want to call them. They hide down in here on the loader. There's a couple of them on the front end. There's one right here on each side. I think there might be one or two up underneath. I'm just going to crawl around this thing. I'm going to take a rag. Whenever I'm greasing anything up, always, you see that little grease zerk in there? How nasty cruddy it is, got crap on the outside of it. The very least you can do is take a rag and wipe the top off of the thing. So that way, like if I were to just put a grease gun on this fitting, plug it on there and start pumping, it's going to pump what little bit of dirt is right there on top, right into the thing. Just take your rag and just wipe off the tip of that nipple. One little tip I want to share with you guys about grease guns. This is the end of my grease gun. This is the fitting that plugs onto the grease zerk. Sometimes you plug onto that zerk and you can't get it, and you're wiggling and you're pulling and you're back and forth. These things unthread. Not all of them, but most of them unthread. And the more you unthread that, the looser the pressure gets on the grease zerk. So like I just had to on a couple of them. I had to loosen this off a little bit and then pop it right off the grease zerk, and then kind of tighten it back up. So. Well, I just ran around here and greased up all the grease fittings. Most of them are on the loader, but there are a couple of them that are, on the tractor itself. Like I think I showed you the one on top there. There's also that pivot point in the center of the axle. I don't know if you'll be able to see it. It's kind of dark. Right there's a grease fitting. And if you go around on the other side, in the front, there's a grease fitting there also. Back in the back here, there's really not any other than on my adjustable top link. There's a couple of fittings on that, but then I take that back. This one here on that lift arm. I'm going to go around here now with a can of WD-40, and there are a lot of metal-to-metal contact points on this tractor that don't have any grease fitting, and they would benefit from some lubrication. So anywhere that I got metal on metal, like this joint here, I'm going to spray some WD-40 in. these sliders here. I'm going to put some WD-40 in. I don't want to smear grease on that because I don't want it to attract a bunch of dirt, because then it won't, you know, you attract a bunch of dirt, it's going to get grimy and it's going to stick. I'm a little hesitant to put oil on it. You could put oil or WD-40. It's just so much more convenient. I do that periodically. I'll just come back here with a can of WD-40. Sometimes when I hook up an implement, I'll just hose everything down back here with a can of WD-40. Also, you got a lot of sort of moving parts. Like down here, you got, you know, a little bit of wiggle on your, like my hydrostat pedal, the seat support, you know, stuff like that. You got that track under there. Over here, your brake pedals. Just anywhere where metal is moving, you know. Spray up in them joints. All this linkage down here, give that a little squirt. So I'm going to go ahead and do all that. Well, I just walked around there with a can of WD-40, and it seemed like the more I looked, the more I found stuff that needed it. That hood latch, I went ahead and hit the support on the gas shock up there. These handles down here, anywhere that's got a spring on it has got, you know, a moving part. So lubricate those up real good, because, you know, they got a grease fitting down at the bottom, but all this stuff up here, and these things can be, you know how much fun those things can be when they're not working right. Lubricate the heck out of that. Seemed like, again, the more I looked, the more I found, you know, every little joint on this thing. When I flipped that seat up, well, I started looking up under here and really paying attention to all the linkages and stuff up under here. Like, gee whiz, there's a linkage on the four-wheel drive, there's a linkage here, there's a linkage under here. Flip that seat up and just start wiggling stuff, and anywhere something wiggles, give it a little squirt. All your eyes back here, again, you know, there's grease fittings on the extension part of the arm, but there's not on these little eye sockets. So, you know, lubricate the heck out of them, especially these things here. They can be a pain sometimes. All that slider, just everywhere. I mean, the more places you look, the more you'll see something wiggling. Go ahead and give it a squirt. I even squirt down around all these couplings and stuff, because I don't use them, but when I do want to use them, I hope they work. So I guess that's all I got on this one, guys. This probably turned into a pretty long video, but there's a lot to this. And total, this has actually been a 2-day project for me, because I didn't have much time yesterday. I put 4 hours in yesterday and 2 hours today, so that'll give you an idea. It was about 6 hours for me to do all this service. So I hope I helped you with this one. If I did, click that thumbs up button. You want to see more videos of me working on stuff out here in the garage, click the subscribe button. Until the next time, keep on tinkering.